Okay, now let's say that we go back to the market now. And we're back there, and at the moment that I actually picked up that bag of M&Ms and put it on the counter, everything around us went into stop action, just froze. And it's just my daughter and me, and now in through the side door comes the television documentary crew, okay? And they show up with a producer with a microphone who's going to interview my daughter. And there's the camera guy and the sound guy, and they all come crashing in there. And the producer goes over to my daughter and says to her, well, Ricky, that was absolutely amazing. Your father had no intention whatsoever of buying those M&Ms for you, and now here he is buying those M&Ms that you wanted him to buy. How did you get him to do that? Now, my daughter, Ricky, if she could verbalize this, again, well, she's 4, right? But she would say something to the effect, well, you know, Sam, having lived with my father for the past 4 years, I know that in spite of all the bluster, my dad is a pretty insecure guy. And I also know that at any point in time, the thing that is foremost on his mind is not appearing like a moron. So I have learned over the years that any time a situation emerges in which my father is uncomfortable, essentially what happens is that every one of those, oh, you're a moron dragons that he has put down there in his basement come busting through that door and start crashing up the stairs. And as soon as one of those dragons rears its ugly head, all of my dad's attention goes to dealing with those dragons that are coming up the basement stairs. And my pitiful little problem of not having peanut M&Ms pales by comparison. Okay? So in essence, what we're saying here is, as soon as my daughter decided to do the screaming, flailing tuna, really what she was doing was creating a dilemma for me. An amazing dilemma, okay? And she knew exactly what it was that she needed to do to create that dilemma. Because the moment that those dragons came up the stairs reminding me what a moron I really am, okay, that's where all my energy went. That felt like the problem to me. And as soon as I picked up that bag of M&Ms to take care of the problem as I encountered it, I essentially got lost in my ability to accurately assess my position and my role in the relationship with my daughter. Okay? Because we've already determined that. We have determined that my role in the relationship with my daughter at any point in time is to facilitate the development of this independently responsible human being. That means I am to be assisting her in figuring out how to deal with her problems. And if we were to go back at this and look at it, whose problem was that really of not having M&Ms? It was her problem. It was her problem, really. But she turned her problem of her not having any M&Ms into my problem of being a moron. Okay? Or feeling as though I am being a moron. So, you know, as soon as those dragons from our own basement began emerging, the most dangerous component about that is that it greatly interferes with our ability to accurately assess the situation and remember what it is that we need to do with our role in that relationship, especially when we're talking about our children. And in essence, our kids want us to forget what the role is, okay? They want us to focus on whatever dragons they can bring up from our basement. You know, that's where they want us to pay attention, so that they forget that ultimately they're supposed to be learning how to deal with their own problems. You know, and when I put the dragons down in the basement by throwing that bag of M&Ms up there on the counter, you know, I can step back and dodge the bullet, go back to my phone conversation. But in essence, though, I have also taught my daughter that this is the quickest way that she has to gain access in the world that she has with me. So now that she is actually 17 years of age now, and if this is the way that our relationship has continued, I'm not going to see the screaming, flailing tuna anymore, but I'm going to get to see the 17-year-old version of that over and over and over. And each time I'm going to be dealing with the same dragons, the same, hey, guess what, you're a moron dragons that keep emerging out of my basement over and over and over, even with more intensity. Because, man, 17-year-olds can really create dilemmas, right? They really know how to do it. They've had 17 years now to figure that whole thing out. Now, we're not going to control what anybody else thinks or does or feels. But what we can control is what's in our own basements. And if we no longer want to be a target of manipulation, really what we have to do is take a look at our own basement, a cold, hard look at what it is that's down there. Now, what is that stuff in there? A lot of that stuff is stuff that maybe we had no control over winding up with it. All right? Painful material that may be associated with just pure genetics or pure protoplasm. This is the way that we landed on this earth. Okay? And there might be some painful aspects about that. There might be those kinds of things that people tend to label us with ADD or a learning disability or any number of things. There might be some physical aspects about our being that are very painful to us. Okay? And, again, that was out of our control. We had no control over the kinds of things that happened to us when we were very young children, when the adults in our lives were making all of the decisions. And if we found ourselves in repeated instances where we were expected to manage things that were beyond our developmental capacity to manage, then there's going to be some painful stuff that overwhelmed us that we're going to put down there in our basement. Of course, then there's stuff in there that we've actually damaged ourselves. The decisions that we've made have damaged ourselves. We've damaged others. We make boneheaded decisions, and as a result of that, there's going to be some of that stuff in there. There's a collection of that in there. And if we are clearing out the basement, really what that means is that we are going in there and we are coming to a conscious acceptance that that really is a part of who we are. And as we gain that conscious acceptance, it means that we will have to feel some of that emotion that's connected to some of that stuff. And that's the part that makes this hard, right? That's the part that makes it so I can't paint a real rosy picture on this. Because if it's painful, if fear or sadness are painful, there's no way to not make them painful. Okay? If shame is painful, there is no way to make that not painful. So when we are bringing it out and bringing it into conscious light and understanding it for the impact that it really has had in our lives, we are still going to experience that pain. The only difference will be that we will no longer experience the pain as punishing, right? We're breaking the equation, pain equals punishment. Because if we're feeling punished by that pain, then of course, anytime we're feeling punished, it's like, wow, there's something wrong with me that I'm being punished, right? And the thing that we're going to try and do here with all of this is, as we are bringing it to conscious light, as we're coming to an understanding that this is a part of my human experience, and these are the painful things that humans feel when we encounter these kinds of things. That yes, it will be appropriate for me to be sad. There may be some things in my life that I absolutely must grieve. There may be some potentials in my life that have been taken away before I had any say in there, right? And I'm not getting those back. And that's kind of a sad thing, I may have to look at my family dynamics and the decisions that my actual parents made and grieve some of those things. But I had no control over that. But it's sad, and it would be an appropriate human experience to be sad about that. You know, I may have to come to a conscious acceptance that I am an individual who does have a legitimate learning disability. That is not going to go away. This is who I am going to be. And it is kind of a sad thing. And it is kind of a fearful thing because I recognize that this is going to impact me for the rest of my life. This is going to impact how I approach my learning and any of my cognitive tasks all of my life. I may have to deal with the fact that, yes, I do have difficulties with extended attention and concentration. And it's not just going to go away. This is who I am. You know, essentially what I am doing is coming to the understanding that there is nothing about my life that is beyond my capacity to accept or manage. You know, it's my life after all. And I am developing a sense of resiliency and responsibility instead of developing dependencies that something or someone else is going to take care of this for me. Unfortunately, sometimes the stuff that we do, especially with young children, is not helping them develop resiliency. We inadvertently are implanting dependencies within them when we attempt therapy. Because little kids have no way really to understand what's going on. They have to take their cues from their external environment. So, you know, if there are some weird things happening to me and all of a sudden everybody's shook up, oh, we got to get to therapy. And it's like, oh my God, little Johnny, he's got ADHD. You know, and so, you know, and I'm starting to get the sense that this is obviously something that's beyond my capacity to manage it. I need my therapist, I need everybody else, I need my parents to be able to handle these kind of things. It's really easy for me as I grow and develop to generalize this so that anything I don't want to do, now I have a whole list of reasons why I can't do this. And I also come to the expectation that my therapist and everybody else that I can round up now is going to show up and remove all of these expectations from me so that I don't ever have to meet the expectations. All I have to do is just make sure that I can bring forward an entire cadre of individuals that's going to fix it for me. So some of those things that are legitimate difficulties in my life, some of those legitimate experiences that I have, instead of me learning how to master those things and accepting that they are a part of my life, and yes, they may have been tough, but guess what, I'm a tough kid, they actually become like hot button kinds of things. That whenever I get in a situation where I don't actually want to have to do what I'm supposed to do, where I actually have to take responsibility for the improvement of my own life, all I have to do is go to the hot button. Okay? So it's like, oh man, this is too hard for me. ADHD. Okay? And immediately I'm expecting someone to come forward and remove the expectation. Adopted. Okay? And immediately I'm expecting, you know, it doesn't matter what is happening, I'm going to find a way to make it so that people in my life can't accurately assess what's really my problem and what's not my problem, you know? I have a lot of those kind of things. You know, adoption is a huge one. My parents' divorce is a huge one. You know, of course, all of the diagnostic labels. I'm bipolar, okay? You know, all of those things instead of, yeah, okay, yes, that is who you are, but that's not the thing that defines you. You know, and I don't ever get to that place where I recognize that I can actually move beyond this, that there is nothing in my life that's beyond my capacity to manage this. Now, we talked about how difficult this is to try and get to with your child in like an outpatient setting. It's odd to watch how cool this happens when they come to Redcliff, because they get here and there is a function of what they do that is really unavoidable. You know, as skilled as they have been at avoiding the business of their life prior to being here, once they show up at Redcliff, everything is an issue. Okay? It's certainly not boot camp. It's certainly not a situation where they're going to get forced compliance. It's certainly not a place where they're going to have these stereotypical authority figures in their face. No, it's not like that at all. But everything is an issue. Everything is now presented to them at an incredibly primitive level, and all of their dependencies are gone. So, the first night as they are laying there under this tarp that's flapping up and down in their face, thinking about, how did this actually happen? The change begins taking place because they haven't been able to avoid that. And it doesn't matter what hour of the day or night they show up, they're here, they get their gear, they're out in the field. If they come in at 2:30 a.m., boom, they're out in the field by about 3. Okay? There's no hanging around here. There's no kind of just easing into this. We're not acclimating, in a bunk here in the building someplace. No, we're right out there in the field. And for some kids, this is the first time that they've ever slept out of doors, let alone just in these kind of primitive conditions. This is the first time for many kids that they've even just had to learn how to lace up boots so they don't come untied. It's odd. It's things like, okay, well, here is this stuff that they laughingly refer to as food, this kind of foreign substance that somehow now must be converted into a form that is actually edible. Palatable is entirely different, but at least edible here when we first start this. And, and then just even getting it from the pot that I cook it in to my mouth is an issue. No one's showing up with flatware, okay? This is not a catered function at all, right? Everything is an issue because we know how this is. We can't just sit down with your child and talk about what it means to be responsible. No. If we could do that, we wouldn't need a place like Redcliff, right? It wouldn't be necessary. It's got to be an experience. And until they experience and actually have a place for that to land within them emotionally, it's not going to make any sense at all. We can't interpret that until there's already that emotional connection that's in there. So a kid can be incredibly resistant. They can show up in the program and think, oh, okay, fine. I'm here, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to talk to my therapist. I'm not going to do any of the phase work. I've been through this a zillion times. All I have to do is just hold out, and eventually somebody else is going to give in, or eventually somebody else is going to come in and rescue me, and it will be okay. So, I can take that approach, and I can avoid doing phase work. I can start feeding my therapist a real line. I've been through a zillion therapists. I know exactly what I need to say. But there is a big portion of my life that I can't avoid. And it doesn't take very long for your child to get to a place where, whether they like it or not, they're actually developing some competencies. They don't want to look at it this way initially. But it only takes a few days before they're actually looking forward to going to sleep each evening. It's not hard to sleep now. And they're looking forward to it. It only takes about a week before they're actually looking forward, especially to that evening meal, because they see themselves becoming the master chefs now, I've learned how to use the bouillon now, and I can make dumplings, okay? Stuff like that is beginning to happen. And the nice piece about this is that what is actually happening is they are creating for themselves this safe place, this component of their lives that is not based on avoidance. It's a place where we can actually stand, so to speak, as we are opening up that door and looking at those dragons. Okay? All of those competencies that they are developing, all of those things that they're going to find out about themselves that really are their strengths, they give us this nice place that we can retreat to this when the dragons get too intense as well. Because as the process unfolds, and if we are asking your children to move beyond a system of manipulation with you, it means that they have to get to a place where they can see themselves managing their own lives. They've got to feel comfortable in doing that. And if there have been so many fearful, painful kinds of things that have been preventing them from doing that, they're not going to be willing to do it. Now they can't do that. So they need to encounter themselves in a position of strength where they have actually had that experience of taking responsibility for their own well-being and succeeding. It's cool to do, and it's a very difficult thing to do for 50 minutes once a week in a therapist's office. But it comes in a beautiful way while we were out here in the wilderness, you know? And that's why the individual therapy component around all of this is so important, because that's the place where we can begin interpreting what's actually happening to that child. They're not going to get it, and we help them interpret it. They'll have the experience, but it's nice to be able to have that interpreted. Okay? All right. So I know that was kind of a convoluted way to talk about manipulation, but as we get around to all of this, okay, the things that we need to remember is, first of all, no one else can actually create that emotion for you to feel, all right? And no one will be able to manipulate you unless you are feeling something you don't want to feel, right? That's the important piece. Now, if you know why those distasteful emotions are arising, if you know from where they are coming, then it's likely that you will no longer be punished by those. You know where they are, okay? You know why they're there. You are familiar with them. You have accepted them. Yes, they are painful, but they're no longer punishing. So if they're not punishing to you, no one else can use them to punish you either. But if you're not sure about where that painful stuff is arising, from where it is arising, then you're going to be a candidate to be manipulated. And it likely means that there's still a piece of awareness about your own basement closet that is incomplete, right? Is that making sense so far? Get that piece? Now, the whole idea about all of this is that if we are in, if we have a conscious awareness of all of that stuff in our own basements, when individuals come to us in those attempts to manipulate us, we will be able to recognize that for what that is. We can distinguish that. Okay, we won't be confused. So that when we see the screaming, flailing tuna, in whatever form it might take, again, we can retain the position that we need to have in that relationship, especially if it's with our child. You know, I can see what's going on. I remember I am the parent here. Okay? Is this embarrassing? Yes. Okay? Would I just as soon not have this happen? Yes. This is not what I would have liked to have had happen, but I am the parent here. And at this point now, I can do whatever it is that I need to do to maintain my position, my role in this relationship. And remember that my primary function here is to facilitate the development of an independently responsible human being. That's what I need to do with my child. And now there are any number of interventions that I can use to help me do that. You know, whatever is going to be appropriate at that point. And I will be able to focus on implementing those interventions as opposed to fighting my own dragons. Okay? That's the major difference. As we are moving beyond this relationship, okay? Yeah, because this gets to be very familiar as we talked about this before. Unfortunately, there are individuals who choose to live their entire existence this way. And really, what is that existence? Well, it's us going from one problem to the next. And we don't ever really resolve them. It's always the same problem over and over and over and over, okay? But it becomes very comfortable and very familiar. I'm going to win this one, you're going to win this one, I'll win this one. You know, and we're keeping score to see who's ahead, because whoever is ahead is the one that has the most control. But again, we don't ever resolve these problems. We don't necessarily ever win them, because even if I'm feeling like I'm in control, it's likely that you're doing something a little passive-aggressively that's, you're getting ready to, put that knife in my back. Now, again, like I say, for some of us, we can live our entire lives this way. And unfortunately, there are those that do this, but it's not a very rewarding way to be. If we get to this place where we come to this recognition, gosh, this progressed far beyond where I want it to be, I've decided now that this is not what I want to do. This is not the kind of relationship that I want to have with you. I'm not going to do this anymore. And by saying that I'm not going to do this anymore, essentially what I am saying to you is, hey, guess what? There's a part of me that's not you. Now, are you going to want to hear that? Heck no, you're not going to want to hear that. And as soon as you hear that, it really gives you two choices. You can either bite the bullet and say, well, okay, it's probably for the best. And as you are going off to figure out who it is that you need to be, maybe that's good for me to do as well. And then perhaps after a while we can meet up over here and work this out on a different level. Okay? That would be the best thing for you to do. What typically happens, however, is if I were to say I'm not going to do this with you any longer, you now are going to go over here to the old grab bag of manipulation and you're going to pull something out of there. But this time you are going to intensify and amplify whatever that manipulation might be, and you are going to bring that full bore against this puny little boundary that I've established for myself, puny little identity. It's still full of holes, you know. I'm still trying to figure all of this out. I'm just saying, hey, there's this part of me that's not you, but you're going to hand me this incredible load of manipulation, far beyond what I would typically expect, so that you can reassert your position in this relationship once again. What do you mean there's not a part of you that's not a part of me? Oh yeah, you think you're going to do that? No, I'm going to show you that you're not going to. And now I'm going to make it so that you have to deal with this intensive load of manipulation. Now, while you are doing this, you might be thinking, gosh, this is not fair that I should have to do this. Here I am, just a very neophyte boundary setter. and now I have this immense load of manipulation that I have to try and manage. It's not fair. But as you come to that conclusion about this not being fair, remember that there was never anything fair about this relationship. Okay? This is not a relationship that was ever based on mutual respect and love. It was not a relationship that was based on trust. Right? And any time we try and break this relationship up or dissolve this relationship, it becomes readily apparent that this is a relationship based on the idea that you do what I want you to do, otherwise I will punish you until you do. Okay? And if I am trying to make you do something that I want you to do, then certainly that means I have absolutely no respect for you as a human being, let alone I have no love for you. Now, for us as parents to get to that spot with our adolescents, just having to swallow that information alone is enough for many of us to decide, you know what, maybe it's not worth it. I think I'm just going to erase this little boundary that I put up there. And we'll try it again. What the heck? Maybe it'll get better spontaneously. And you need to know this little piece. This is one of those things that you're going to be subjected to this anyway. So you might as well know as much about this as you can. Okay? And in order to understand this, we're going to have just this little graph here where we're actually going to chart behavior. And on this axis right here, we will describe this as the intensity level of the behavior that we are examining. And on this axis down here, this is where we are going to track that over time. Okay? So let's say that as we are muddling along here, we are finding that that undesirable behavior level is kind of just hovering right in here someplace. Now our preference would be, something more acceptable would probably be down about right in here. That's a place where we can handle it, but this is where it's getting out of hand. So at this point in time right here, we decide, all right, we're not going to do this anymore. We are actually going to intervene, and we apply some level of intervention right at this point. Now, does the behavior at that point just kind of coming along, oop, intervention, oh gosh, I guess I better knock it off. Is that what usually happens? No. It's not happening hardly at all. What will happen then, as soon as as soon as we apply the intervention, we are now going to be subjected to what is known as the extinction burst. Okay? And that means that we are going to see a very rapid acceleration in the intensity level of that behavior. It's going to rise very, very quickly. Okay, and there really is a purpose behind that, especially if we're saying, no, we're not going to do this anymore. I am now in control. This is like, oh, no, you aren't either. Watch how much punishment I actually can apply here. Look at how much manipulation I can actually apply. Look how intense this is going to get for you. And it certainly is there when we're talking about your children. It's there to get you to freak out about all of this so that you're watching this and going, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm just making this whole thing worse. I can't believe that this is actually happening. You know, getting to that point where you truly are convinced that the intervention has actually made things worse. You know, with the idea that perhaps if we get up here, then, you know, it's like, oh, I can't take this, I can't watch this going, so I'm going to remove the intervention at this spot. Okay, thinking that, well, you know, at least I can go back down here to this familiar territory where it was before. The only difficulty is that if we've gone through the extinction burst and then we remove that intervention at this point, what we actually have done now is just establish a new baseline up here. Okay? That's the new level that we're going to be looking at. So, you know, which is quite a ways up from where we started. So as we are moving along through time and we get back to this place where we're completely exasperated, once again saying, you know, I can't do this. I have to try that intervention one more time because I can't keep living like this. Then once again, there is that extinction burst that we're going to see. And now this behavior level is way up here in the stratosphere, far beyond what we actually expected it to be. You know, even in our wildest dreams, we wonder, how did it get to be this way? Well, it's this way. Now, the whole key to all of this is that when we apply the intervention, it's best for us to anticipate that, yes, there will be that extinction burst. Okay? You got to know that it's going to happen. And if you can anticipate it and watch it happen, like, yep, there it is. Okay? And we can anticipate that this is going to happen, but we maintain the intervention. It stays in place. And yes, we will see that extinction burst, but we will also see it get to this point where it fades off very quickly as well. Okay? Where it gets to that point of diminishing returns, where more energy is going in than the actual benefits received from that. And that's where we actually allow it to fade out and extinguish. But if we apply the intervention, remove the intervention, apply the intervention, remove the intervention, really all we are doing is strengthening that behavior. That's how slot machines work, you know? That's why they work as well as they do. But when we're attempting to eliminate a behavior, we don't want to approach it like a slot machine. We want to maintain that consistency, keep it in place, anticipate that, yes, there is going to be that intensified level of manipulation, but maintain that intervention, maintain the structure, and then it will die out, you know? And really what we're saying here is this boundary here, this identity is being solidified. There is much more of me now that is not you. Okay? I'm becoming much more firm in my sense of who I am and how I can be okay independently without you. Okay? I don't need this relationship in order to define me. And as I solidify this boundary, then that means that you're going to really have to do something else, because the manipulation is no longer able to have the impact that it once did. When we talked about this before as well, we're setting up the boundary and it means that's off to Redcliff for you. Specifically, how does this happen for your child then? They show up at Redcliff and the first stage that they encounter is just landing here. Okay? acknowledging that this is where their life is now going to be administrated. And, you know, you would think that that would be pretty easy. Okay, your home is 2,000 miles away, you're here. Well, no. You know, they show up with the idea that even though they are here, the last thing that they want to do is give up control of that family dynamic. You know, they see themselves as the center of that family dynamic, and they do not want to lose that perceived influence that goes along with that. So they are here, and they envision their family being in complete chaos without them present. You know, they are envisioning their family being as disrupted as they are. They are feeling grief and feeling punished. So they envision their family being back at home, just huddled together in the corner of a living room someplace, holding each other and crying, you know, without any direction and completely dysfunctional, because they're not there to provide that hub around which the family must rotate. Now, so they show up, and maintaining that sense of themselves, the center of the universe orientation, they decide, you know what, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to do this. So I'm just going to give my parents their marching orders now. And so I'm going to sit down and write that first Redcliff letter. All right, and I hope you probably brought those with you, didn't you, okay? Yeah. You know, if you have any, I guess you could say, if you have any, I guess, inquiries as to what is in your own basements, I can usually refer you to that first Redcliff letter, and that will help you know what's in your basement, what fears lie down there, okay? Because your kids will know what they are. And, you know, I'm going to sit down, here I am as the center of the universe, I'm going to write that letter to my parents. Okay, you know, whatever it might be. It takes many different forms. You know, every kid is going to do what it is that they think they need to do. They're going to play on whatever it is that they need to play on fears of their parents or concerns of their parents. Other kids will like, hey, thanks for sending me here. You know, I've only been here a very brief period of time, but I've come to that conclusion that you as my parents are the most important people in my life, and I'm ready to come home now and be the son that you've always wanted me to be. I'm anxiously awaiting your arrival, like tomorrow would be good. You know? Those kinds of letters, you know, there's any of those, okay? However I'm going to approach this, I'm going to write that letter home and I'm going to send it off, knowing that my family has absolutely nothing better to do with their pitiful little lives than just kind of sit around waiting for any information they can get about me. So as soon as they get that letter, that guilt-evoking letter that I am sending to them, that it's immediately going to persuade them to dispatch a limo with a hot pizza on the front seat that's going to show up out here and whisk me away from Redcliff. So, you know, when I first get here, no, I'm not landing here. I'm just waiting for the limo to show up. And it may be that I have to send out 2 or 3 of those "where's the limo people" letters, you know, before I come to that conclusion that the limo's not coming. This is a tough time for you as parents. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a tough time for your child as well, because the limo has always come before. They expect that it's going to come this time as well. These are those times when you have to have that faith in your own experience, when you recall the periods in your life when you were up against it. And you might have thought to yourself, gosh, it would be nice if the limo showed up and got me out of this. And it didn't show up, and you had to deal with whatever that was. You know, that certainly is what taught you to be the adult that you have become. And the process is the same for your child. It's absolutely the same for your child. You know, and a part of that is you need as parents to get those letters in their uncensored form as well. It's very important that that's the way that they come. We don't have students give us the letters to go through and correct and give them back. You know, there are students that come from other programs that that are kind of confused by all that because they're used to handing their letters to the therapist hands them back with all the corrections they need to make before they send them home. You know, for me that makes no sense whatsoever, absolutely no sense whatsoever, because in the grand scheme of things, the relationship that I have with your child is pretty minuscule. It's going to come to an end. As soon as you see this place in your rearview mirror, I'm history, I'm irrelevant at that point. Okay? It's the relationship between you and your child that is actually going to be the lasting relationship and the one that is the most important. So, if your child elects to write you a letter that's 2 solid pages of F you, I'm never talking to you again, okay? If that's the kind of letter that they're going to write to you, you need to see that letter because that will be probably the greatest indicator of where they are in their developmental progression. Right there in black and white from their own hand. And it's not something that I've seen with my eyes. They're not writing it to me, thinking that they're going to pull one over on Doc Dan, okay, so that Doc Dan will let them out of here. No, that's what you need to see. And you need to see those letters as a huge indicator of the progression that gets made out here. So if it starts with 2 solid pages of FU, that's where it's going to start. That's also another reason why we don't have you write that impact letter as it has become to be known, you know. As soon as your child lands here, we don't have you write that letter that says, here are all the reasons why you're there. Here's the impact that you have had in our family as a result of your behavior. No, we don't have you do that. Okay? That's why our therapists tend to tell you the best thing to do is not write any letter until you get a letter from your child. You know, because if we write that impact letter, it's essentially telling your child that we're still willing to play the game with them. Okay? What kid really does not know in his heart of hearts why he is here? Okay? Yeah, you know, I've been smoking pot every day for the last 4 years. I've stolen from my parents on numerous occasions. I'm flunking out of school. But I don't think I deserve this. Why am I here? Okay? What kid really does not know that? And if we are writing that letter saying, these are all the things that you have done, we're still playing the game with them. We're not disrupting the pattern. And essentially by writing that letter, I think we've lengthened the period of time that we have before we successfully disrupt that letter. Because now I'm going to fire back all of these letters to you, telling you that you had no right to send me here, that you are just misinterpreting everything, it's all a huge mistake, and no, I really didn't do that. You know, and we're arguing back and forth in the mail. Why? What's the point? You can do that at home for free. You don't need to do that here for $400 a day. Okay? No, we're disrupting the pattern. So it's important. And when your child sends you that guilt-evoking letter, that's why we also say, well, you get a letter like that, let's look at that for the level of commitment that they are making in that letter. That level of commitment they are making to being your child. And if you are getting one of those letters where it's still putting you under scrutiny, your decisions, your ability to be the parents, your decisions to have sent him here, you know, your wisdom, whatever it might be, your rights to have sent him here, whatever else, then essentially they're saying, no, I don't want to be your child. I want to be the one that tells you what to do. I'm still doing this. So the letters are a beautiful indicator for that. You know, as long as you're getting those letters where it's still all about you, all about your decision to have made and put him here, you know, or all about how much Redcliff actually sucks, you know, things like that, then you know we're still at that pretty primitive level. There's not been a whole lot that's changed. Now, if you write one of those letters back where, you know, you get the 2 pages of FU and you're trying, now, Johnny, you know that you really need to be, and this is going to be a good experience. We never tell you to write those letters. What do we tell you to write? You get one of those letters, you write a letter back and says, well, you know, the weather here has been pretty good. It's been a little iffy, you know, and the cat's doing well. And we're trying to decide whether to have the lasagna or the chicken for dinner, okay? Those are the kind of letters that you write back. Because you're no longer playing the game. And essentially you're saying to your child, okay, the level of commitment that you're making, we're going to match that same level of commitment. You know, it's that poker game. It's like you throw in the $5 chip, we're throwing in the $5 chip, we're never raising you and we're never calling. It's all up to you. Okay? As soon as you write the $10 letter, then we're writing the $10 letter. but not until then. You know, it's interesting. So it's cool when those kids know that they've written that golden letter. They know that those words are going to fly off the page and their parents are going to be immediately called to action because they know that they won't be able to stand themselves if they don't send the limo. And so they're anxiously awaiting for the limo or the letter, and the letter comes back and they're looking at it and they say, I don't think my parents wrote this letter. This doesn't sound like my parents. You know? It's disrupting the process. That's really what we're doing. It starts at that level. So it's a little different for every student, but they get to that place where they finally decide, okay, the limo is not coming. For some students, they keep in their heads, well, they said, whoever they is, the escorts, whoever, they said it was only a 30-day program. So I know my parents are never going to let me stay out here past 30 days. Well, on day 31, they decide, well, I guess I am actually here. And there's stuff like my parents would never keep me here through Christmas. My parents would never keep me here for my birthday. My parents would never keep me here for any other excuse. My little sister's birthday, because that's so important to me. You know, things like that. And, you know, they have to get to that place where they've decided, it's different now. The limo's not coming. I guess I am actually here. And once we are there, then, we are introduced to this next stage, and it can come from an introduction from, other members of my group, my field staff, my therapist, and in essence, it goes something along like this. Well, Johnny, the limo's not coming. You are actually here. So you tell me, what do you need? What do you need, Johnny? Now, you've had those discussions with your child in the past, you know, and it may have even taken place in family therapy, in the context of family therapy, whereas like, look, you tell me, just tell us what it is that you need so that we can help you along here. Just give us a clue, whatever it might be. And it's pretty frustrating because at that point then Johnny is going to zip up his hoodie as far as he possibly can and pull it down over his eyes and slip back into the corner of the couch and feign as though he is going to sleep. All right? And, you know, when that happens, though, really what's going on is every radar that Johnny has is going full blast, and he's looking to find out how much energy you are willing to put into finding out what he needs. Okay? That's really all that he's looking for. He's never going to tell you what he needs, right? Because if he tells you what he needs, then now you're going to hold him accountable for that. Right now, I'm not going to make any commitments at all to you or myself. I'm going to do whatever I want in the moment, and you have to fix it. So I'm not going to tell you what I need. What I do want to find out is, how much are you willing to put energy into finding out what I need? Because I need to see that I can still influence you. And if the sheer fact of me zipping up my hoodie and pulling it down over my eyes now makes it so that you're going to play an extended game of 20 questions with me, I have a lot of influence still, you know? That's what I want to see. How much influence do I still have over you? So, when Johnny hears that little question out here, what do you need, Johnny? And if he decides to pull up the zipper on his hoodie and pull it down over his eyes, it's not going to quite get that same response. You know, it's going to get something more along the lines of, well, very good. I'm glad you don't know what it is that you need because that tells me you're right where you need to be. And this is an important decision in your life, so go ahead and take all the time you need to figure it out. Okay? Yeah, in fact, you're actually going to like our summer gear. It's a lot better than what you've been schlepping around out here in the winter. It's not quite as much weight. So yeah, take whatever time you need, and if it ever occurs to you and you want to talk to me about it, well, here I am. Okay? There's not a lot of energy that anybody's putting into figuring out what's going on with Johnny. The thing is, though, they know what it is that they need, and even if they're being kind of a smart aleck about this, and they say something like, well, I'll tell you what I need. I just need to get out of here. Well, that's exactly what we want them to say. That's exactly it. Because at that point, we can say, okay, you're telling me that you need to get out of here. Well, guess what? I need you to get out of here as well. That's the whole point of this. You come here, you deal with the problems that you have, and then you leave. So with the amount of energy that you are willing to put into getting out of here, well, I can match that same level of energy. And now we have the skeletal framework for the relationship that we're going to need for all this to take place. Okay? But it could not happen until you, Johnny, actually were willing to say, I need to get out of here. Okay? That's where it starts, just at that incremental level of commitment. But I'm not going to do anything until you make that tiny, minute level of commitment. Once you do, then we can move into the second phase here. This is that integration piece, where now you're essentially saying, well, I need to get out of here. What do I do with this structure? I begin that process of figuring out how do I master this structure. And I'm going to bumble around with all of this. It's going to confuse me. I'm going to have a hard time with this initially. You know, because I'm saying, okay, yeah, I want you to get out of here. Great. Well, give me that phone call. I'll just call my parents. No. Okay? I need you to get out of here, but I need you to get out of here the way that you're supposed to be getting out of here, the way that you came here to get out of here. You know, and so, you know, I'm going to bumble around with this quite a bit. And when the problems start showing up especially, I'm not going to know what to do with those, because I'm not very good at solving problems. That's always been somebody else's job in my life. So, for instance, let's say the first problem that we're talking about here is that of the bow drill fire. Okay? The classic #1 problem that your child is going to encounter right out of the chute. It's one of the first things that we have them do, mainly because we want it to be a diagnostic instrument. And it's a great one. Okay? It's not some little cute activity that we have them do that somehow reflects maybe the aboriginal nature of the program. No, it's a beautiful diagnostic instrument. You know, because your child's exposure to this comes in the form of about a 2-page written summary with some line drawings that tells them how they have to identify the raw materials that they need, how to appropriately harvest those raw materials, how to fashion the raw materials into the components of the implements, how to fashion them all together, and then physically manipulate them so that they can produce a coal. Okay? And the coal that they produce is like the head of a pin-sized coal that they're making. And then, now what do I do with this coal so that I can actually make fire with that coal as well? So your students read those instructions and they look around and they think to themselves, there is no freaking way that this will ever happen in my lifetime. Okay? Yeah, absolutely. I will die before this actually happens. And yet, at the same time, this is a component of that structure that I'm looking at. What do I do with this? You know, so I'll avoid it. I'll try and cheat on this. I'll get somebody else to do this for me. You know, there's a lot of things that I can do as far as going back into those former patterns, all right? These are those times when I hear from students things like, well, gee, Doc Dan, I don't know why I should have to do the bow drill fire because, #1, it's stupid, okay? Stupid is always the #1 reason, right? See, I'm still the master scrutinizer. I'm the one that determines what's relevant in my life and what's not. #2 is I will never, ever have to do a bow drill fire at any point in my life. You know, in fact, I'm never even leaving the city, again, if I get back from Redcliff. And if I ever do leave the city and venture to a rural area, I will do what any sane person does, and take a lighter with me, okay? And #3 is my parents didn't send me here to do a bow drill fire. And in fact, since I've already accomplished everything that my parents sent me here to do, I don't know how you could be so cruel, Doc Dan, as to keep me here day after day after day just because I'm not doing the bow drill fire. How could you be so insensitive to my parents' needs and just keep me here because you're trying to keep their money, okay? So we hear stuff like this all the time, where I'm making my problem of not wanting to do the bow drill fire somebody else's problem. All right? So when we hear this, what's the approach that we take, or what actually happens?